Hey guys, how's it going? So today I'm going to be showing you how to export from Maya and to import in game engines. So for that purpose, I have prepped this chessboard. One thing that is going to be really important for me is going to be where my pivot points are for all the pieces. Notice that all the pieces are going to have them at the origin of the piece, whereas the chessboard is going to have it right at the center, not entirely on the where I want the pivot point to be. If anything, I would like the table to be revolving not around that, but around the this like at the level of the legs. So for now, I'm just gonna make do with that, and I will show you what is the implication once you get into the game engine. So let's take a look at this. Now, the structure that I have down here is going to be pretty straightforward. I have a chessboard, which is going to be grouped under this whole thing. I'm also going to have a group of the black pieces and the group of the white pieces. Now, notice too that there's pieces that are repeated, right? So I have 8 of the pawn pieces, 8 of the rooks, for each color, I mean, and 2 knights and 2 bishops, just 1 king and 1 queen. That's all. Those are the only pieces that are not repeating the side of the chessboard. But the important part here is that everything is in a single scene. So this is one way of exporting that is not going to be affecting, how you export all of the individual pieces. I can technically export them one by one, and that will save me some time, but for the sake of this assignment, I think this is pretty straightforward. So let me show you what I will do if I was exporting these individual pieces. But first off, let me export them as a whole group. So I'm going to be making a new folder that is going to be happening on the Windows side, so probably you won't be able to see this, but I will call this chessboard, right? So with that, I'm going to select the group that contains everything. If you don't have a group, you can just select everything. That should be the same. But I will be selecting the group and I'm going to go File and Game Exporter. Now, in my Game Exporter, I have the default settings here. So basically, where do I want to save this thing? I'm going to choose the path. As I said, I save these on my desktop. So I'm going to go to my desktop and I will go for my chessboard. That's the folder I want to save this in. And this whole group is going to be my chess set. So I'm going to say chess set. And yeah, that's it. I don't really want to play with any other settings in here. I know that Maya is not using exactly the same settings in units, I mean for Unreal or Unity. And so we're going to be changing that in a second. But for now, I'm just going to hit export. And with that, if I take a look at what's the content of my folder, that is just going to be the chessboard. So for this chessboard, I only have 3 materials. I have the chessboard material, I have a white, and I have a black materials. Because of that, what I will need to do is add the texture that this chessboard contain for the board. So for that, I know that my location is going to be on where my project folder is. In reality, so I'm just gonna go to this PC. I have it in the L drive, Google Work, JB 219, and assignments. So I'm gonna go here onto my chess set and my source scenes. This is where I save my texture. This is the texture that I'm going to be working with. So I'm going to take a copy of that, go back to where I exported. So again, that's going to be on my desktop and then chessboard. And I'm going to be located. So technically, this is all I need in order to bring it to a game engine, but I'm going to show you how to export to a different file when to export them individual pieces. So I'm going to take the king and I'm going to say control 1. Control 1 means just show me the selection. So control 1. I'm gonna enable the wireframe, the grid for the floor. I'm gonna press W for movement. I'm gonna hold X, and X is going to let me move around by snapping into the grid. So I'm gonna take that. The values here need to be reset. So I'm gonna go to my modify, freeze transformations, and then again, I already have that game exporter, but as a reminder, it's going to be File, Game Exporter. Now, I don't want to export all. The only thing that I want to export is the selection. So export that selection. And this is not going to be the chess set. This is going to be the chess king. And I'm going to hit export. And it was exported. So I have these 2 files now. Let's go back here. Let's do it one more time. Control 1 is going to make everything visible again. I'm going to take my knight. Control 1 just to occlude the view of everything else, and I'm going to hold X and move it to that position. So that's going to be all of these values. Mesh and, modify and freeze transformations. Again, File, game exporter, and I will be exporting that as the knight. Now, if you don't have that game exporter window, in some cases it's not installed, it's not enabled by default, so you'll need to go to Windows, Setting Preferences, and then Plugin Manager. That is gonna bring in this window, and you just need to find, it's almost down at the bottom. It's my FBX Maya MLL. So just enable that. You should be good to go. So that is just in case you don't see this game export over here. But you can achieve the same result by going to export selection. And that is going to open my selection window or my export window, which is going to let me select among many different file types. So either or, but it's better to do it with a game exporter because it's going to be optimized for that. All right. So with that, what I will do is launch my Epic launcher. I'm going to go to the Unreal Engine tab and then go to my library. I will launch my 426.2, that is the latest version in at the time of this video recording. And I'm going to continue from there once this is done loading. All right, that once that is launched, I'm gonna select games and I'm going to go to the next tab. For here, you can pretty much do any template, but I'm gonna start with a third person. Feel free to play with the other ones, but I'm gonna start with the third person. I will be doing blueprints. Maximum quality, you can choose that. Scalable or maximum quality doesn't really matter. Ray tracing is only, you should only have these if you have a NVIDIA RTX 30 something card. I don't, so that's gonna be disabled. This is going to be my desktop or console. Either one is fine. I will do console. If you do mobile tablet, it is going to be easier to get ported to a mobile device because you're going to have controllers for that. But I'm going to be using this on my desktop. So desktop and console. And the important part here is don't use starter content because that is going to throw in a lot of facets onto your project. So no starter content. I'll save this in my desktop. The name of the project is going to be chess, and I will be creating the project. So that is going to close that. That is going to start making this folder and the content of that thing. I have a SteamVR headset that every single time that I run Unreal, it is going to tell me if I want to connect it because I have it currently disconnected. But this is going to be my window for the tab. Okay. I'm gonna enable my tree view because it's easier to just move from here. And I'm gonna be making a new folder. So this folder is going to be models. I'm going to go inside of that folder and I'm going to add another folder. This one is going to be my chess. So I'm gonna go in here and yeah, what I wanna do is either hit add import, or I can just take my chess set, which is the one that contains all of the pieces, and drag and drop it into my. So that is going to contain all of the individual pieces. Now, the uniform scale, right now it's 1. That is the default. I know that my scene is made in a 100 scale, what it should be. So in theory, I just need to add 100 in here. I'm not gonna do that because I want to show you how to change that after you import it. So yeah, let's say that I do that at 50 right now, and then I'm gonna change that in a second. Because otherwise, if I do the 1, it is gonna be super small. That is just because how the measurements in Maya versus the measurements in Unreal are working. So the units, and I should have this convert scene enabled as well, but that is not going to help me in all of the cases, especially if I'm working with an OBJ file. So that is it. 50 convert scene units, and that's it. Import all. What's going to happen is it's going to start importing all of the individual pieces that I have, all the groups by meshes. So there's a couple of things here that are working with binomers and by tangents. This is basically just saying, hey, it is going before or beyond the tolerance values. So just there can be a mesh corruption. So just be sure that your mesh is working right. So it is, I know. So I'm gonna take all of this. Now notice that in here I have a lot of different things, including 2 materials, M black, M chessboard, and M white. Also the chessboard. The material for the chessboard is going to be using this texture. So everything is gonna get in here. And now what I want to is, if I take one of these pieces and drag it into the world, notice that it's floating just because the way that I exported it pretty much said, hey, I don't care where the pivot point is, just export it as a location was in the world. So I cannot use these individual pieces unless I modify the pivot point, which is not something that I want to do right now. First off, I'm going to be removing all of these guys like that. Notice that I have baked shadows in my floor, so that's why I see this thing. I can select the world light and check that to movable. That is going to make them less obvious, but the texture is still, the lights still are baked into these. So I'm going to be taking a couple of other things out, like my help and my sign. But what I want to do is make sure that all of the assets are scaled properly. So if I just select them and drag and drop them into my world, the chessboard is, pretty much as it is when I export them from Maya. But that is not the right size that I want my chessboard. Like, I mean, right now, sure, the chessboard is somewhat large scale, but I will still want to make it larger just because those are the units that I made in Maya. Also notice this thing here. I'm going to be floating on top of my board. So let's take a look at what's going on. I'm going to take a look at my chessboard here. I'm going to open that. And that is going to bring in this other tab. This tab is going to be the editor for the site. So if I select, well, actually it's already selected because it's the mobile viewer, but if I take a look at the collision here, I have two ways of showing the collision. This is the complex collision, so it is going to create a box that is tied to my object. But currently, the collision that is enabled is this simple collision. And notice that it's just trying to make convex shapes work in here. There's going to be no space down here. So the issue is, well, it's not really an issue, but the reason why I'm walking on top of that is because it's using that collision. So I can really just select this thing, go down here to where it says collision presets, and down here you will say collision complexity. I want to use not project default, but I will say use complex collision as simple. And that is basically meaning, hey, this thing is just going to work like that. So I'm going to hit play once again. And now when I jump into my board, I am touching the board, right? So that's what I wanted. But I also want to change the size of these. So I'm going to select that and I can say, where is it located? I want to export these on my details and make it a little bit larger. So that's gonna be on my import. I think that's in level LOD1. Okay, there it is, LOD1. Build settings, I'll expand that thing and it says, hey, what is the build scale? So when I imported it as 50. So basically I will need to say twice that size of the import. So I have it at 100 by changes and that's gonna get larger. So with that, I'm gonna need to save. And if I go back to my map, the board is the size that I wanted it to be. But I need to do that for every single one of those individual pieces. So that doesn't really work that well for me. I'm going to select all of the pieces. I'm going to just remove them. Actually, I need to remove them from my world first. So with those pieces selected, I'm just going to hit delete. And I need to remove them individually. All right, so here, where are they? All of you guys, delete, there you go. So I'm going to take them out of my world as well. So yeah, force delete them. I'm going to remove all the references that I have down there. That's why I was complaining because I have a tab open with that. And I'm going to hit add import. So it's better if you know the size of your object first. So this is also how you can import from here. Click on that and then go to my desktop. That's where I have this chessboard, and then select chess set that contains all of the pieces. Boom. Now instead of 50, I'm going to say 100, and then I shouldn't really need to edit all of the individual pieces by hand. One thing that I will still need to do though is I'm going to go back to my chessboard, reopen that, and make sure that it's using, okay, now it's the right size, make sure that it's using the complex collision. So that is going to be once again under my collision presets, collision complexity, and use complex collision. I'll save that. And also, you don't want to do that for every single piece. Notice how this bishop is, if I select collision and simple collision, this is a good enough collision. It's not so expensive to calculate. But if I was to do that for every single asset in the world, do you see that this is not showing me the vertices or the faces? this is showing me the complexity of the collision. So this is going to be way harder to calculate. It's going to give you better results because if I shoot a bullet right here, it's going to go through, like let's say here where my mouse is. If I shoot a bullet here, it is not going to hit my object. Whereas if I use a simple collision here, it's going to give me a collision. But it's less expensive to calculate. And remember that in games, what we want is this thing to be a fast simulation. So that's it. I have all of my pieces selected. I'm going to take all of these guys and I'm just going to move them in here. Once they are in my world, I'm going to move them a little bit up. And what I will do is go to my geometry. I'm going to go to my linear stair. That's too many steps. So I'll say, hey, give me like 7 steps. Sure, that's good enough. I'm going to push these forward. And I hit play. And now my character should be able to go into the board. It's not floating. And it's, with the shapes. Now, these shapes are not movable right now. They have a physics body, but it's only gonna let me like step on top of the body. I will select all of these pieces, and then in the settings I'm going to go down to where it says simulate physics and click enable. I don't want to simulate the physics for the table though, so I'll select that individually and say no, hit play, and that's it. That's as simple as making that collision happen. And now I can go into my board and start pushing these pieces around, and that's great. All right. Issues. Well, if I take one of these knights, or well, let's take the king, and I put it here, notice how it's just completely off. And again, because that is because the pivot point. When I exported everything, it's using the center of the world. So I will need to edit the pivot point. One thing that I can do, which is going to be a little bit more efficient, would be if I go and import that model. Let's say the king individually, hit open. I know that the size needs to be 100. That's going to maintain the size from the last import. I'm going to hit import all. And now if I go back here, it is going to have that at the pivot point where it was exported. So that is really important if I want to do some transformations, right? Control W is going to let me create another copy of that thing. Or if you hold Alt and then move the mouse or the piece, it is going to create another copy. I can make yet another material, releasely add a new material. This material is going to be my M white. And if I open this whole tree and click, that's going to give me a new color that I'm going to paste into base. That is going to open the color clicker. This is going to be white, so the value is full. And I'm going to hit save. So white material. I'm gonna go to this and I'm just gonna drag and drop it on top of another piece. So now I have this other thing, right? So I have the two of them, and they're not simulating physics, come to think about it, so I get close to them. But they are just clones of the original one. So if I edit this and I say all of a sudden, you know what, I want the simple collision to go away, I want the complex collision, it is going to get applied to all of those objects. All right. I'm going to select the three of them, and I'm going to go to simulate physics. Now, one thing that is important, I'm going to do that with a white piece, is I can specify the kilograms. So if I say, you know what, you are 1 kilogram in mass, when I hit play, this piece is going to be really hard to push around, and this piece, look at that. Just a little force is going to make that thing go flying away. So usually it gets a really cool complete calculation of the volume just based on the size. So the kilograms or the mass is going to be calculated by the volume. But in some cases, maybe these pieces are super heavy, so you may want to change those values individually and by hand. But otherwise, you can just say, yeah, simulate the physics, but use the default calculation that you did for the mass. Okay, I think that's it. That's everything I wanted to talk about how to export and import in Unreal. So what I'll do next is I will be exporting these into Unity. So for Unity, I'm not gonna go all in depth because we already saw that in a past video, but I will take a look at the projects tab and I'm gonna be creating a new project. And I'm going to be using the 2020.3. Let me, oops, yeah, well, I created it that way. So that's fine. I meant to do that in newer version, but I don't know if even I have it installed here in my computer. But anyways, the point is it's going to start creating my project and it's going to start installing the packages. And this takes a little while, so I'm just going to pause the video and I'll continue in a second. Okay, so now that it's downloading, you'll see that my scene is completely empty, so there's really nothing going on in my world. If I hit play, even my simulation is just going to be a complete blank scene. There's nothing going on. So going back to my scene, what I'll do is create a new game object. This game object is going to be a simple plane. So 3D object, plane, that is where my thing is going to be going. You can follow the terrain tutorial if you want to, but for now, I'm just going to be making a simple plane. Now, in my assets, I'm going to be creating a new create folder. And this folder is going to be my models. Now, in my models, what I'll do is right click and it's getting out of the camera view, but I can do the same thing. I'm going to select the two of them, I'm going to drag and drop them into my world. So that is going to be importing them. And the thing with that is that Unity collapses everything into a single object. Do you see that? Right now I have all of the things that I need that are going to be collected into this .bx file. So I can easily just drag and drop it into my world. And the thing is super small. So I won't be able to even see it. I'm going to take that chess set and I will be taking out of the world. But I'm going to take my chess set and in my inspector, you will see that I have a scale factor. So in here, I know already that this is 100. So I'm going to say that. And I need to click on something else like the rig that is going to make the, it's going to apply that that thing. So, oh, there you go, apply changes. And now with that, I can just drag and drop them into my world. Oh, the plane is so small. So we'll select this guy and I'm going to make it larger there. So that's that. That's basically how you import these in Unity. Now, all of the pieces are going to be separated. So you can actually just take one of them and put it in the world. But I think you have to scale them again. So this is going to be at a scale of 1. Let's say 200, just so I can see it. 200, 100, 200. What is that? I don't even remember what I dragged. Oh, that's it. So that is the bishop. Way too large. Let's make that 100, 100, 100. And it is going to be asking you what is the material that this thing has or is using. So right now it says none. I should be able to just click on this and this window is going to pop up. Let's just do a black material and there you go. You have one of these pieces. Now notice the pivot point is really at the centroid of the shape, different than what you had inside of Unreal. So the best thing that you can do in any case is export individual pieces. It's just going to require a little bit more work on your side, but that is it on this lesson. Right now I don't have a camera controller, so if I hit play, I shouldn't really be able to see anything. So I'm just looking into the space and the infinite. Remember that we have a Git folder that we are sharing, so you can import controllers. But right now I don't have that on my installation. So that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.